Pan's Labyrinth is one of my favourite films. It tells the story of a girl called Ofelia who's living in Francoist Spain. If you haven't watched it, why not? Best film ever! This will have spoilers in it, so you've been warned. The lullaby which is interwoven into the film's narrative is particularly poignant. What is it about this lullaby that makes it so bittersweet? Why is Mercedes singing it and not Ophelia's mum? You know what I mean? To answer these questions, I'll be taking you through some fairy tale tropes, a sprinkle of Jungian psychology, alchemy of course, and some musical analysis to find out the answers. Welcome to the Film Music Junkie, where we analyse film scores to see how they are emotionally manipulating an audience. My name is Olita, and let's just dig ourselves a hole and jump into it, shall we? Let's go. What is a lullaby? It's a quiet, gentle song sung to children to send them to dreamland. In some societies, they're used to pass down cultural knowledge or traditions. They are often simple and repetitive as to, send a child to sleep. The word comes from the Middle English word lullen, as in to send someone to sleep, and by, as in to be physically close to someone. So why is a lullaby used in Pan's Labyrinth? The narrative of the film makes it almost impossible for it not to be a lullaby, in my opinion. To understand the significance of this lullaby, we need to first look at fairy tales. Fairy tales speak of witches, trolls, man-eating goblins, poison apples. They teach children about the suffering they will encounter in life, but, in a more imaginative way. It would be cruel just to tell a child straight up their life's gonna be full of suffering, loss, grief, pus, These stories tell children that they can overcome adversity, but only if they choose to be brave. In Pan's Labyrinth, Ofelia uses the fantasy world to understand the real world. This split between reality and the fantasy world is a huge part of this film's narrative, and you can actually hear it in the music score as well. So there are quite a few similarities between fairy tales and lullabies, and let's look at them right now. They are both passed down through oral tradition, as in they're passed from one generation to the next, etc. They often tell stories within a set structure. They are simple and easy to remember, and both fairy tale and lullabies often use the rule of three, as in the three bears, three little pigs, Billy Goats Gruff, Billy Bus, three Billy Goats Gruff, there we go. And lullabies are often in 3/4 time, as in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And what's really cool is that the lullaby is heard 3 times in the film, the beginning, the middle, and the end. So yeah, rule of 3, look at me. Just like how the film, Just like how the film explores the merging of two worlds, the fantasy and the reality worlds, the score actually has a fantasy and also a reality theme. The first theme I'll call the reality theme, and that's the sung lullaby. The second theme I'll call the fantasy theme, and this is more instrumental and choir based. The lullaby has no lyrics, so it fits perfectly into this story. At the beginning of the film, we're told the fairy tale of Princess Moana, who longs to go to the human world. However, upon her arrival, she just dies. Happens to us all. Her soul kept on living, but she forgot who she was. The memory of her past is gone, but you can still find echoes of Princess Moana in the present. This idea is imitated in the forgotten lyrics of the lullaby, but the tune still remains. This fits in with how oral tradition works. A lot of the time, the knowledge or songs that are passed down through oral tradition are either embellished, changed, or sometimes just completely forgotten to the wind. So even though the words of the lullaby are lost, the melody and emotional intent behind the lullaby were strong enough to be remembered from one generation to the next, etc. And the emotional intent behind the lullaby is that maternal love, that type of deal. It represents a few other things, and let's just get into them, shall we? So why is it so important that it's a woman singing this lullaby? So we can tell from this tweet that Del Toro, the director, is a bit of a cheeky Carl Jung fan. So of course we need to have a quick look at some Jungian archetypes. to understand why this lullaby is being sung by a woman. This was swiped from Very Well Mind, the 4 major archetypes, because, you know, I'm a scholar and I steal. Archetypes are universal inborn models of people, behaviours, or personalities that play a role in influencing human behaviour. They were introduced by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who suggested that these archetypes were archaic forms of innate human knowledge passed down from our ancestors. Jung believed that we inherit these archetypes, much in the way we inherit instinctive patterns of behaviour. So some of the archetypes include the trickster, the hero, the wise old man. Think of Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. They use those archetypes as well. And the archetype I'm going to talk about is the mother archetype. In an interview on the DVD extras, yes, I've got the DVD extras, I'm bougie, Del Toro talks about the female energy. So already having a woman singing goes with his vision for the film. But let's, go a bit deeper. So I watched one podcast and read a few paragraphs about the mother archetype, which makes me a specialist at it now. In the Future Thinkers podcast, they talked about how the positive and negative versions of the mother archetype manifest in people and society. So what I did, hear me out, give me a little hear out, I looked at the attributes of the positive and negative manifestations of the mother archetype, and then I watched the film and then I ascribed those attributes to the characters. And by Lord, this is exciting. Hear me out. They talked about the positive manifestations of the mother archetype, and here they are. Selflessness, self-sacrifice, accepting people for what they are, allowing children to fully express themselves, and having a connection with nature. Which character is accepting, selfless, connected to nature, good with children? Vidal. Okay, I'm just kidding. He's an absolute bellend. It's Mercedes, who I'm dressed as, by the way. This took quite a lot of effort. I'm even wearing some shoes. Hopefully you didn't see down my skirt. Who is the one humming the lullaby? 3, 2, 1, all together now. Mercedes. So I think it's fair to say that this lullaby is the musical representation of the mother archetype. So the end of the film is about Ofelia coming of age through her manifesting some of the mother archetype traits, when she selflessly protected her younger brother. Ophelia's breathing and the lullaby are in sync, and this adds to the idea that Ophelia's become one with the mother archetype. So cool. The mother archetype is about having and raising children, but it's also about nature and the circle of life and death. And wait a sec, guys, this lullaby is heard at the start and the end of the film, which represents the circle of life and death. Oh! Get your Ouroboros. I don't know how to say it. The snake eating its own tail. Ouroboros? But it's that snake eating its own tail, and right at the end of the film, you see the sort of the inside of the labyrinth, and Ophelia's at the top, and that's sort of the Ouroboros. I don't know how to say it. I'm embarrassed. Now let's have a look at how the composer wrote the lullaby. It sounds familiar, like it was sung to us as children, but actually it was just written for the film. The key here is its simplicity. Look at how the melody is constructed. All stepwise movements, the notes are next to each other. Repetition of small melodic ideas. Simple rhythms. The scalic transition between notes, just scales basically, they're very evocative of other lullabies. Think Frere Jacques, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Row 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 Your Boat. It's easy to learn after a few listens. The melody is sort of anchoring around the note E. It's going above and then below, and that sort of anchors it within a key. Why does the tune need to be simple, you're probably asking? Because, would you just start singing some next up, I don't know, avant-garde unicorn opera to a child who needs to fall asleep? I probably would, but that's just me. It's simple because, you're singing this to a child who you want to soothe into dreamland. The notes are scalic and have a wave-like quality, and this resembles the chest when you're breathing in and out while you're sleeping. Bar 7 is the same as bars 1 and 4, but starts on a lower note, making it a musical sequence where a musical motif repeats, starting on a different note. We then have a change in rhythm in the melody, where again the melody keeps returning to E. This resembles Ophelia's desire to return to her mother's womb. That sounds a bit wacky, but I think it has legs. but my brain is not intelligent enough to, make up some wanky thing to connect that to connect those two things together. So all well and good, right? Why does it sound so harrowing though? It's the harmony.
So the harmony is A minor, D minor second inversion, B diminished, and then A minor.
So all darker sounding chords if we were to, do some GCSE music. Yeah, that diminished second chord is twangy. I love it. It feels like it wants to resolve and go to a consonant chord, and it does, thank you. So at the end of the film, Mercedes is singing the lullaby and we hear the strings as well. Of course she doesn't hear the strings, those strings are for the audience to hear. So the harmonic content of the cue at the end of the film is solely for the audience, and these chords are telling us something. What are they telling us? Tell me right now. Okay, since this music is also heard at the start of the film, it sets up the tone for this bleak yet beautiful story. If we were to be doing GCSE music, the minor chords represent the melancholy of the film, basically. The diminished chord represents the emotional distress Ofelia goes through in the film. Even though Mercedes isn't Ophelia's biological mother, they are much more like each other and have almost parallel storylines. Ophelia's being in the fantasy world and Mercedes is being in the real world. So I've written something I can't actually say without looking at it. So let me just read it out and be a bit humble because I don't remember how to say words. So Mercedes' maternal connection to Ofelia by no means trumps that of Ophelia's mother's relationship with her. But Mercedes' manifestation of the positive mother archetype is much stronger than that of Carmen's. That sentence took me ages to get. Woo! Got it. Carmen is much more passive, and through her actions she actually manifests more of the negative mother archetype. She imposes her beliefs on Ofelia and tells her she knows best, basically. Again, this is why Mercedes is singing the lullaby and not Carmen. What a bitch. So a lot of symbology is packed into this simple melody, which makes it so cool, man. I can't even do that. Oh, that was a good one. Yeah. I love it. I believe that the fantasy theme represents the great work of alchemy and Ophelia's reincarnation. So I read one book on alchemy, and so now I'm an alchemist, apparently. Alchemy has a bad rap, and I too laughed at it because I had no idea what it was actually about. Alchemy is the art of transformation. So yes, transforming lead into gold was part of it. But that was only the surface of it, really. The physical aspects of alchemy were misused by punks and charlatans to make some money. This overshadowed the more esoteric philosophical side of alchemical practices. From a quick Wikipedia search, because I'm an absolute scholar, if we take the word alchemy back to its roots, it means the process of transmutation by which to fuse or reunite with the divine or original form. And my cat needs to be quiet. I love you, but please, quieten down. That didn't work. There are other roots of where this word came from, such as chemi, which was the fertile black soil around the sides of the River Nile back in the ancient ancient Egypt times, because alchemy came from Egypt. But I'm going to go with that first definition about, reuniting with the divine, because that has much more to do with Ophelia's story than black soil. Yeah. The great work, or the magnum opus of alchemy, is to create the Philosopher's Stone. This involved many different chemical stages. The creation of the Philosopher's Stone is to be taken more metaphorically for the most part. It's about the process of going from chaos to order through a purification process. This perfectly describes Ophelia's journey from the chaos of the real world to the purity of the underground kingdom. The tasks Ofelia had to complete and the suffering she went through could be called the purification process. And when she returns to the underworld, this can be described as her completing the great work. She fully purified her soul when she sacrificed her life for that of an innocent, her little brother. The first time you hear the fantasy theme is at the beginning of the film with that narrated fairy tale. So when the camera pans down from the real world into the fantasy realm, That's where we hear the chords hinting at the fantasy theme. So the fantasy theme represents Ophelia's unification with the divine, as well as the fantasy world as a whole. How does the composer encompass these ideas musically? Here's his name on the screen because I don't know how to pronounce it. I'll butcher it so bad. All the music is going in an upward trajectory and resembles the journey to self-transcendence. The theme played on the cellos is going upwards in a scalic fashion. The first violins and violas are going in a more wave-like form, but still going in an upward trajectory. To me, this represents the purification process of alchemy. You know, it's gritty, it's hard, and also this represents all the ups and downs of Ophelia's journey to self-transcendence. The upwards trajectory of the music could also represent Princess Moana going up those stairs at the beginning of the film as well. Pretty cool. The female voice gives the music that ethereal taste, making the audience think of a choir of angels and places beyond this realm. The pizzicato double bass part punctuates the root of the chord lightly and softly, like droplets of warmth. That was cheesy and I'm sorry. The ebb and flow nature of those high string lines also makes me think of nature growing as well. The harmony at the start of the fantasy theme is very different from the reality theme. We have a lovely C major chord here, and everything in the fantasy theme was all minor and diminished. So this contrast is reflected also in the imagery of the film. Think of, you know, a lovely little story being told and then someone getting their face bashed in with a glass bottle. You know, that contrast is something Del Toro loves to do. We have a C major first inversion chord to begin with. First inversion chords aren't stable and they feel like they always need to resolve to something. This creates a sense of longing and need. This ties into the idea of going through the different stages of the great work. We have violin ones cheekily playing around with sevenths and ninths, giving the music a different harmonic sound compared to the reality theme. This makes the fantasy theme convey a different idea to that of the reality theme, and that's of beauty, divinity, angels, I don't know, just, you know, that ethereal sound. You know what I mean? The appoggiaturas in the violin part creates tension and release, which reflects the stressful journey of self-transcendence. We hear a root position C major chord when she realises her family is in front of her and a choir is singing the theme. The root position chord has a sense of finality about it because it has the tonic at the bottom of the chord. This represents the metaphorical creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Or to put it in a less jargony way, she completed her journey. So the smile she gives at the end of the film before she dies in the real world is showing that she is happy that she completed her magnum opus. What's really cool about this film is at the end of it, there's the blurring between the reality and the fantasy worlds. The blurring. Ooh. This is shown through the two colour palettes of the reality and fantasy world merging together, but also with the story where Ofelia escapes a locked room in the real world using her fantasy chalk. Oh man, I wish I had some fantasy chalk. Just leave the room whenever I want. The labyrinth opening up, even though, you know, there's no dead end in the labyrinth, but, you know, for the story, that's what Del Toro said. The cuts between Ofelia dying and her returning to the underground kingdom, along with the fantasy and the reality theme, you know, playing one after another, resembles the ambiguity of whether or not the fantasy world is real or not. We then finish off the film with a blooming flower, and that's all about rebirth and all that stuff. I was about to say bullshit, but we're not allowed to swear here, are we? I promised myself I wouldn't swear on this, and I think I have a few times. Yeah, so there we go. Finished now, but yeah, loved all the symbology that the music represents, and let's just say, emotions successfully manipulated. You know when you get a lump in your throat, but you don't cry? I cried and had a lump in my throat at the end of this film. Thanks for watching, guys, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Don't forget to dance.